And welcome to Thrift Shop Biography. This is the one about Morrissey. Thank you for listening. Hi.
Hello.
So this week we've been reading the autobiography of Morrissey. I don't need to say he's a lead singer of the Smiths, right? We all know who Morrissey is.
Not everybody would know that.
It's true, actually. Yeah, we're not just...
The Smiths, a band that I think are from the 80s, but they're not. They're from...
Well, they are.
Well, yes.
They existed in the 80s.
They did.
But I don't think of them as an 80s band. It's interesting you should say that. Because I think they're timeless, actually.
Think you're right.
Yeah, and I think they could have come from any era.
I think you're right.
But anyway, Morrissey started off as a frontman of the Smiths, and he's now had a much longer solo career in his own right. And he's written a rather impressive autobiography. I love that it's called Autobiography, because his use of language is just so brilliant.
Yeah.
And his records and his songs have the most wonderful titles, and yet his book is just called Autobiography. I think that's witty in itself. Yeah. What did you think about Morrissey before you read the book?
Okay, I hated Morrissey.
Hated him?
I don't hate him, but I would have said, right, when I was a kid in the 80s, I hated the music.
Really?
Yeah. Because I was a kid and I liked the happy music, and that was miserable music. Yeah. And of course I couldn't relate to any of what it was about, and so we hated him. We all did. It was fun to hate Smiths and love whatever else. Yeah. And so to me, every day is like Sunday. I'm miserable, blah, blah, blah. And now I've read this book, I realise that that's what the British press have not let him ever escape from. And I was one who was also trapped in that. And that's all I really knew about him. I knew he was quietly gay. I knew he really hated meat and people who eat meat. And he's a great vegetarian, advocator of vegetarianism. And I thought he lived in America. And that's all I knew.
Okay. Well, some of that is true.
Yeah. And I didn't want to read this book.
You didn't want to read it?
I mean, I did because I'm enjoying reading books, but this would never have been my choice.
Oh, God, when I found it in the shop, I was so pleased to find it in the shop, because I was like, I can read it.
It's more you than me, this one.
Yeah, but I did actually... I wasn't worried about you reading it, because the whole point of this podcast is that we're reading books about people that we might never have read, so that certainly fulfills that. But I knew that you were on holiday in Mexico reading it, and I thought, because you were ahead of me, I thought it'd be really depressing and miserable, and I actually said to you, sent me a picture of yourself on an inflatable flamingo rubber ring in the reading the Morrissey autobiography.
Which is definitely a massive contradiction.
Yeah. And I think I replied to that saying, oh, God, I'm so sorry. You have to read it, because we don't talk about...
We banned ourselves from saying a word, so you have no idea even if I enjoyed it or not, do you?
I know. This is the very first time we've talked about it. What?
Absolutely loved it.
Fucking hell, I loved it.
Completely come round to the Smiths, completely come round to Morrissey. I think he's a poet. Oh. And I've loved every page.
Yeah.
I have to read sentences more than once because the alliteration and the imagery, it's like the whole book is, even when he's whinging on about the record industry, it's still the way it's written. It's pure poetry. He's got such a way with words.
I know.
And I've loved reading this book.
Yeah, I have, to the point now that I've finished it. I only finished it, yesterday. I can't wait to read it again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I want to read it because obviously we're reading books quickly for doing this podcast, and I felt I almost, because it was so beautifully and thoughtfully written, I thought I did it an injustice by reading it so fast. Right. And I'm really looking forward to read. I don't know when I'm going to read it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, I was really annoying people by going, hey, listen to this sentence, listen to this. How amazing is that? I was doing that all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
I've already recommended this book to like 10 people already. Now I would say, look, if you're listening, read Morrissey's autobiography, whether you like him or not. My co-host here has already said she hated him and she loves the book. Yeah. So go for it. Can I just say how I felt before I read the book?
Yeah.
So totally different to you.
Yeah, you love the Smiths, don't you?
I do love the Smiths. And I loved Morrissey, actually, as a person and an artist. But of course, as you know, he's not always so prominently in the public eye these days. So, you kind of hear less about them. And the things I'd heard about him in recent years was about his racism.
You didn't even know that those were total lies.
It's that awful thing. And doing this podcast is teaching me so much, whether it's about Michael Jackson being wacko jacko and abusing young boys, whether it's Jane Fonda's participation in anti-war activism, whether it's Morrissey being racist. It's so surprising to me because I think I'm so savvy when it comes to the media and stuff. Actually, how manipulated I am.
Yeah.
And it's not that I actively agree with them. It's just the relentless repetition of all the clickbait tweets and articles and headlines. It goes in.
Yeah, you think if every single article on Morrissey says this about him, well, it must be true eventually.
And they do. And the thing is as well, again, it's not just articles, then all of a sudden it's people on Twitter or Facebook, and then your friends will say, I used to love Morrissey, but now he's racist. And when you hear that 50 times...
It literally feels like he's been massively bullied by a nation, his own nation. And
the music press. But it's the thing with the press, how they build somebody up and they're the hero, and then all of a sudden they want to tear you down.
His own record label slagged him off the whole time whilst he made them a mint.
A mint.
That bloke Jeff just slagging him off. Well, that isn't very good. Well, that was embarrassing. Or this isn't very good. You're not number one because maybe the tunes aren't very good.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I know. And then like that woman, he's just done his first solo appearance on the Top of the Pops, and she phones him up and he thinks it's gone well. She phones him up and said that was so embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's like, who are these people?
I mean, literally, it's astounding. The amount of stuff shit he takes throughout his entire life is astounding.
Yeah.
He must have a thick skin because he's still going.
He sure is. Anyway, should we start at the beginning?
Yes.
That was quite a long.
Yeah.
The whole first part of the book is kind of this really vivid account of growing up working class in Manchester. I kind of really enjoyed reading it, not necessarily as Morrissey, but just this account of childhood. I got a really good feeling of what it was actually like to be there in the... Is it the end of the 60s? Yeah. And
post-war Manchester, post-war northern life.
Yeah, and just like the changing face of it as well. But also half of it is actually what goes on in his mind and how he escaped from it. Like there's a lot about the music he listened to, obviously, but also about the TV shows and stuff he watched. And
books he read.
And the poetry. Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, he documents a lot of the TV shows by listing the titles,
and then going right into them and describing the stories.
Yeah.
It's like some people might say, I was out on a bike hanging out with this mate, but his fun as a child happened through TV, books and in his head.
It is also still important to him, the fact that he's writing his autobiography and he's still listing those things.
Those were his adventures.
Yeah.
He didn't physically have them, but mentally...
Yeah.
That was his life.
It was a real mixture of, well, not high art, but like poetry and literature, but also mass media, like the TV dramas and the soap operas.
Yeah.
And you can see how actually he's carried that through his work visually with the Smiths and as Morrissey, the solo artist, because some of their singles covers were stills from kind of those kitchen sink dramas.
So Bogard and those films.
Yeah, and also been watching a couple of his videos online this week on YouTube, and some of his solo videos, like there's one for Dagenham Dave, which is so good.
Yeah.
And it kind of almost is like a kitchen sink drama in itself.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting. I'm glad that he included all of this stuff that he...
It makes sense of him.
Yeah, it does make sense of him. So it was him and his sister and his mum and dad.
And his parents, he doesn't really talk about it, but they didn't obviously get on and they were arguing a lot and divorced eventually. But he doesn't really mention that. His escape was through music and television. And they both seemed like kind of nice parents individually.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have much
No, they just didn't get on with each other.
Which is quite unusual for a celebrity.
Yeah, it is actually.
Yeah.
And he... he's gay, but he didn't...
No, you say that. You said that at the beginning he was quietly gay. I don't think he is.
No, okay.
I think he's bisexual, probably. Because he's with a woman now, right? And here's the thing.
He's very, very cagey about these things.
Cagey, he's deliberately ambivalent.
Yeah,
when he talks about his relationship with a man and when he talks about his relationship with a woman, unless you actually... make that connection in your head. I don't think he explicitly really says he's in a sexual relationship with either of them.
Okay, you're right. The only relationship and real love that he has was with a man, and it was for 2 years.
Oh, well, what do you think about, is it Tina at the end? He's been with her a lot longer.
Yeah.
They've talked about having a child together. So I assumed as much. He talks about her in the same way that he talked about the guy Jake at the beginning, and that you're not explicitly
not in the if you're reading the poetry sense.
Yeah.
The poetry of his time with that bloke is like the hours evaporated. It was lyrically like love.
Oh well, then
one doesn't have the same
it does.
sentiment.
It does. It has the same sentiment. But from a man 20 years older, who wants different things from a relationship at that point. And he just says how easy it is with her and spending time. He has different needs from a 25-year-old man to a 45-year-old man. That's what I got. It was just a different take on two relationships.
Because what my point was going to be was that he doesn't connect with men or women throughout his entire life, really. He very much says that he just doesn't... It's just not part of who he is. He doesn't find himself attractive to either one, and he just gets left alone, and he's just sort of on the outside all the time, not really connecting with that side of life. He really has trouble making friends. He really doesn't have many friends, and then when he makes a friend, he's so pleased. And he's got one friend who's around the house a lot, and eventually this bloke says, "I'm really sorry, my mum thinks you're a bad influence on me. I can't see you anymore." It's just really poignant because he said, "As I sit at home on my own, reading George Eliot poems by the light of a lamp, I think to myself, well, that's odd because I'm neither bad nor in any way influential." And it really basically sums up his whole life, doesn't it? That's how he sees himself so differently from how other people see him.
Yeah, for sure.
So he really gets lost in music early on. As soon as he gets any money, he's spending it on going to gigs, and he sees all his heroes, and it's really brilliant. Like T-Rex, Bowie, the New York Dolls changed his life. Yeah.
It's weird actually because the New York Dolls never hit big over here. If you weren't necessarily into them or that type of music, they came and went so quickly to the point where I think the average music fan are aware of them insofar as that successful musicians now cite them as an influence, but at the time they would have completely passed you by.
The only reason I heard of them is because Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran used to always cite them as his favourite.
Really?
So I sort of
interesting.
Perked up an interest.
Yeah.
But so they were this post-punk,
I think they're early 70s,
group who
from New York,
completely dressed as women, very glamorous women with full-on makeup and draped themselves around each other. Yeah, and to young Morrissey, it must have blown his mind. Yeah, because he said it made everyone else look like milkman or something. Yeah.
He does talk about music a lot, and I love this. This is how important music is, Tim, and I think you will relate to this as well. There were times when all would judge squarely and fairly on their musical tastes, and a personal music collection read as private medical records. Wow. I totally get that. It's just an essential part of you, your music taste, for a music fan. I never trusted those people at school who were really into sport. And then you'd say what music, they never really considered music. They might just been to Dire Straits or something. It's just, what?
I remember some people used to say, "What's your favourite music?" They used to say soundtracks.
Soundtracks?
Yeah, so your favourite music is what other people tell you to listen to when you've seen a film. You haven't chosen it.
Yeah, right.
You can't, that's nuts.
Yeah.
I slightly get it, but also you've got to make your own choices. But anyway, we're music lovers.
Yeah, we are, but it is, I guess, I don't know, we're not into sport, are we?
No.
In the same way that somebody might be a bit perplexed if they knew I wasn't really into sport. They'd say, what sport do you? I don't know.
Wow, if you're absolutely passionate about football, then... Yeah,
it makes no sense when other people are. Yeah. That one quote does,
it's amazing.
Absolutely, that music is a lifeblood because it just is.
It is, and especially when you're not sure who you are and how to express yourself. Yeah, you find the people that are doing that for you. So if Morrissey does that for you, and that's me. I don't know.
So therefore,
Disco.
how does like a young sports fan who isn't into music, who do they find to express themselves? Is it players on the football team?
Yeah, do they? Well, maybe they don't.
Maybe they
don't have a way of expressing themselves and then end up
Maybe
depressed.
they don't need expressing, because do you know what I found out?
Yeah.
Some people don't have an internal monologue.
Oh, how do you find that out?
Yeah, I know. How do you find that out? Because if they don't have it, how do you explain it to them?
Wow.
That
really?
they don't, yeah.
It's
about like 40% of people don't have an internal monologue.
Well, they just go...
They don't do anything.
Go to the kettle and go to the oven and go to work and stuff.
Yeah, they don't just ponder every movement.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, I
So
found
we're
that
all
weird.
differently.
So I actually think that those people are into sport, probably.
I knew it differently. Yeah. Some of us need it more. So some of us need a messiah through music to lead us, to help us understand ourselves and to help express what we're feeling. And so we latch on to the music that helps us do that.
Yeah. Do you know what I found about this book is it's hard to talk about. Even though I enjoyed reading about his childhood and being a young man, because there's 100 pages of it beautifully written. But actually thinking now, trying to pick out a particular bit to talk about, I don't think there is much.
No, it's like a poem. You'd have to recite the whole thing.
Yeah, I would say the first important thing that happened in his life, insofar as being Morrissey and frontman of the Smiths, is when the Smiths formed. Actually,
it's true. I kept thinking, I should. This passage, I'm going to mark this to mention in this. I'll mark this, and I thought actually you could literally open this book at any page and read a sentence, because it conjures up images, and it's really good. It's really good.
Because I obviously knew Morrissey and loved him, and I don't know why I was just surprised at how beautiful the book is. I should have known that.
I suppose so. Yeah, he's going to write it lyrically because he's a lyrical person.
But it's like, it's a long book and every line is just beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Which makes me think it just came easy to him,
Yeah.
Obviously he would have gone over it a couple of times, but I think this is the man. This is a language he uses.
Yeah.
This is the way he presents himself. It's just, do you know what? Can I just go out on a limb here? Am I going out on a limb? I think it's one of the best books I've ever read.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Forget about it being a Morrissey autobiography.
Yeah.
The first 100 pages are such a beautiful storytelling of working class life in Manchester. Taking in the whole family, the sister, the gran, and about a changing face of Manchester, like these are the last people living on this street forever.
Post-war, and before they... isn't it really cool, the bit where he's got a friend who's a little bit New York Dolls, and they're roaming the streets of Manchester, and they find the outdoor set of Coronation Street. They managed to wangle a gate open, and they're on the outdoor set. And then all of Coronation Street cast turn up to film, and he loves Corrie. So Coronation Street is a British soap opera set in Manchester, working class, by the way, American people. And he meets his heroes. Yeah. And then they assume them to be extras. One of them says, "Can you be here tomorrow to ride a bike?"
So he
gets an actual part, tiny part.
In the background.
That's so of its time as well.
Yeah, that would
60s,
never happen now.
Because things aren't locked up properly. And, it's all still a bit ramshackled.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
No, I love that. Yeah, I think my frustration was, so he went on at length about his childhood and his formative years, but then when he gets to meeting Johnny Marr and forming the Smiths, it's probably 5 pages and they have their record deal, and so it's kind of like, no, I want the amount of time you've told me about the first 20 years of your life. Please, I want more about how the Smiths happened and how they formed. It's done quite quickly. Yeah. And I was frustrated with that. I was like, oh my God, we're here. You have a record, you're in the charts already.
That's what you were interested in, because I'm not that bothered about that. I love the rest of it. It is one massive, long, elongated poem, isn't it? Yeah. To Manchester and its bleak streets and.
Yeah. Do you know what it reminded me of? And I don't say this in any way to be detrimental, because it might seem a bit more flippant, but in terms of this kind of humour and wit, it really reminded me of The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole.
Oh, did it? Yeah. In just the way that everything's miserable.
And just the way he talks about people, it's so funny.
That's true. Characters.
Yeah, the observations of people.
It's that sort of thing where even if someone gave him an ice cream, it would probably fall off and fall on the floor. It's so... it's so unbelievably miserable and negative. that I laughed a lot out loud at it.
And this is what it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of like his reactions are just so morose and stuff, but they're comically morose, and that's intentional, right? But I think that's just his personality.
Yeah, it is his personality.
But no, I think the humour's not lost on him.
Yeah,
I don't believe. I mean, at times he probably was depressed and stuff, but I don't get his aura as a person. I think there's always been wit and humour about him, and that does come through in the book, because it is weirdly miserable and morose in places, but it doesn't have a darkness to it. There's a levity. It's always quite light.
It must be because I laughed all the way through it, and I'm not cruel.
Yeah.
So, I hope.
That he's always had a reputation as being miserable, and I get it, because most people take things at face value.
That's his angle.
Yeah, but it's not like bleak miserabilism.
No.
There's always been not a warmth, but a light to it, I suppose.
But in an era where it was all bouncy pop and disco, which was all trying to push you on and trying to encourage you, that was for everyone else.
Yeah.
Didn't feel like that.
And I also think that's why I think they're a bit timeless, is that they don't fit in.
They don't.
The time when they came out, the Smiths certainly aren't a product.
A lot of people followed, but they were leading.
Yeah. I mean, they are essentially a product of their environment, coming from Manchester and being working class and stuff, but I don't necessarily get that they're a product of the time where they came out. Although politically, you could argue that actually they absolutely are. Yeah. But the sound, the music they were making was not.
All of them, by the time they formed, him, Johnny Marr and the other two, they all had... I love
that, because that's exactly the Smiths. Him, Johnny Marr and the other two.
You shouldn't care about them. Especially not as it evolved. Yeah. They all were of Irish descent. So I wonder if there's... I don't know if that's just making it up, because I don't know if they had any Irish music in their lives, but I wonder if that sort of folk edge enters into the sound at all.
I don't think there's anything particularly Irish about their music. Oh, do you know what? I might go on Wikipedia later, and where it lists the name of the band members, it might change to Morrissey, Johnny Marr, and the other two.
Yeah, yes.
So look, there's a lot talked about his teenage years and stuff, and how much he loves music, and I think there are a couple of musical dalliances, but it's not until he meets Johnny Marr.
He was like 21 by then, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was really thought his time was done. There was no way out. He's had some jobs, and it was just unemployment, nothing happening.
Johnny Marr is a particularly gifted guitarist, and they have some kind of a connection. Morrissey's obviously the lyricist and the singer, and they start bashing out a few tunes together, and it works.
It seems like they take off. As soon as they meet, they just go... Pew.
Well, you see, that's my thing with the book, is that the book would have you believe that.
Yes.
But I think he's wrapped it up so succinctly.
Yeah, you don't
but I think it can't have been like that.
Well, maybe it just was, though. Because if you look, because now I've been listening to them properly and thinking about it, they do just seem to gel together amazingly. So
it is just that thing of two people coming together again, and then having to draft in obviously the other two.
Yeah.
The rhythm section.
Yeah.
And then, actually, no, here's the thing. Nobody wanted them, right?
Yeah.
Like, no record labels wanted them, and they ended up going with Rough Trade, who were essentially not much of a record label at all.
No, very small. But, yeah, it sounds like, anyway, very quickly they started doing gigs and got a following. So that every city they went to, they had a following.
That's right.
Very quickly.
But still, the record label didn't want to sign them, is that right?
Yeah, and the press was saying, they turned down all these big labels. They never did.
They never did.
It's the only offer they ever had.
They went to Rough Trade, who weren't equipped to deal with them. Let's face it. Well, not equipped. It's not that they weren't equipped to deal with them. They weren't equipped to deal with their success, which happened very quickly.
Yeah.
And essentially could have finished them off as soon as they started.
Yeah.
They was.
So, for example, when they launched an album, it could have gone to number one, but they couldn't print enough cassettes or albums or whatever in time.
That happened so many... Do you know what? Here's another thing.
Incompetence is incredible.
He has massive success, right?
Yeah.
As a singer-songwriter of all time. He's one of the most successful singer-songwriters from the UK of all time.
Which is almost the best-kept secret.
Yes, but the thing is that he doesn't even seem to rest on that, because at certain times in this book he's kind of saying, oh, this would have gone to number one had only. This song could have got higher in the charts. I very nearly got a massive deal with this. It's like, what you've done is enough. It's fine. Just chill out. You don't need to tell us you could have been so much
was kept
bigger.
off number one by Phil Collins. I sunk into a deep depression. Well, you got to number two, and Phil Collins has got, like, you know, the world are backing him financially.
The first album went in at number 2, held off by the Thompson Twins, and he said somebody at Rough Trade, the record label, said to him, we didn't get the cassettes out in time. If we'd have got the cassettes out in time, it would have been a number one album. You kind of think, all right, Rough Trade, okay, they were a small label. They hit success as quick as the Smiths did. There were no act before the Smiths on Rough Trade on this level. So it was a learning curve for everyone.
But they also continuously didn't believe in him.
Yeah, no, they didn't.
Continuously. So
and they continually effed up the supply chain.
Yeah.
It did make me wonder, reading about how, like, the Smiths single went in at number 25 and then just hung about, even though all of their gigs were massively successful, but they couldn't get a record in the top 20. And I looked back, I went on to the chart website and looked at the Smiths chart history, and actually it's so average, and you kind of think they're one of the biggest bands in Britain. And so it's nothing to do with the music, it's nothing to do with the fans, it's to do with the fact that the record label
just couldn't sell them,
keep up with the demand. The supply chain was broken.
So it meant they never hit high numbers, but like I said, whenever Morrissey tours solo America, the Smiths back catalogue always massively surges, so they'll never still get to number one, but overall sales over years and years and years is absolutely steady.
Of course it wouldn't happen now because of streaming. It's not relied on physical sales anymore, even though vinyl's having a resurgence. It would be interesting if the Smiths had happened now, or whether streaming was available.
Because it would have met demand.
They'd have been number one all the time.
They would have. There's one bit where he says, I think it was in the 90s, can't remember which band, but the other band had released their single on the Sunday.
Oh, it was Keane.
And they'd released theirs on the Monday.
This is a Morrissey album, not a Smiths album.
Morrissey album. So by the time they counted it, they were one day behind. It's like, well, why didn't you release it on the Sunday? And you know what I'm thinking as well? You know how somebody like Madonna is always called a control freak? Because she wants to see every album, she wants to check the remix. You get a reputation like that's a bad thing. She's a control freak. Well, part of me goes, Morrissey, why didn't you insist on looking, saying I need approval before you release? What I want to see the cover that I did the artwork before you print it. You know, so many times he did the album covers, and then they fucked it up or changed it. But you kind of like, you should be in the studio every single day, not sitting reading poetry. I mean, that's not fair to say it, because he trusted those people, I guess, but you should be saying, I want to look over that, I want to do that. If it hurts so much after the first 5 times you get screwed over, you think you'll go, I need to check it.
Because he did say at one point, one of the album sleeves was so bad, he thought it could only be sabotage. Because he said there's no way that a copywriter or a proofreader would let this many mistakes go through.
Or they're like, the album cover, we've only put a part of the picture on.
That was weird that anybody would do that anyway. So it's For the World Won't Listen, which is a Smiths album, which has like 5 people on it. And then, so that's the LP cover. It's an old black and white photograph. It looks great. And then when they came to release a CD, which happens simultaneously, they cropped out one of the heads for the CD cover. It's like the dimensions of an LP cover are exactly the same.
And they're like, oh, you can't see it. It's too small. And he went, the Sgt. Pepper album all fits onto a CD.
It's just so weird. He's
I just
constantly
think they're really
let
crap.
down.
I think everyone's just really, really crap at their jobs. Everyone is surrounded by incompetence, honestly. But at that point, that's when he should step in. I think, obviously, hindsight's... It
is.
He had so many...
It does surprise me that, again, Morrissey, the living icon with a sensational body of work and millions of record sales, in his autobiography, is still detailing each time the record
every single time
wrong.
You think after that many times you'd step in.
It really bothered. I like that it bothered him, but you're right. But that's not his personality. He's not his personality. He's not like an alpha male,
not
whereas like you just said Madonna is alpha.
And he feels suicidal every single time. But then maybe that fuels his music. Right. I'm hurt again.
If he was the type of person who sought and demanded complete approval on everything, you'd be singing a Madonna song.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But instead, he gets crushed. Reads some poetry, has a little whiskey, and writes a song, another masterpiece. Yeah, that's how it works, isn't it? Anyway, back to the plot, right?
So the Smiths...
He's met Johnny Marr. They seem to naturally form a band. They tour. They get signed. Bunch of incompetence, just to recap.
Yeah.
Then, they just continue being successful for about 5 years?
Yeah.
They're touring, albums are out, tons of stuff goes horribly wrong in small ways.
Yeah, they also get signed, interestingly enough, to Sire Records, and it's Seymour Stein is the man who signed Madonna.
Right.
And what's incredible is how they managed Madonna's career, which is such a sharp upward trajectory over like 2 years. She's the biggest thing on the planet.
Bumble along with the bloody
failed the Smiths spectacularly.
Yeah.
To the point where Seymour Stein says to Morrissey, how come you guys are selling so many concert tickets?
Because they've done nothing to promote them and they can't understand how they're selling.
But not even recognising how many concert tickets they're selling. Oh, we better promote the album then.
Yeah.
They're just not promoting them whatsoever. They never had a top 100 Billboard hit. The Smiths never had one. Yet they brought over James to support them.
Yeah.
Said to Sire Records, oh, you should sign James, another Manchester band. Signed James, they got a top 100 Billboard hit with their first single. But the Smiths, who are just absolutely massive, the biggest band from England in the 80s, never had an American hit because their American record label let them down. But even
it doesn't make sense to let them down because they could be making money. It's a business.
Yes.
So why are they letting them down when they could be cleaning up?
And they can do it because they have Madonna.
Yeah,
it's just all they had to do was the same, throw as much money at them as they have with Madonna, and they would have been huge. I know, but you would think if they saw the receipts from their box office sales, they think, oh, this is worth investing in.
Yeah, you would. But then around that, it seems like the whole time, they weren't all really moulding as people clearly, and like he said he found himself alone a lot when they were on tour, that they were all conspiring and just leaving him out, and actually they were conspiring to leave him all the time.
They're idiots. Morrissey. Okay, unusually, idiots. I would say with the Smiths, it wasn't just Morrissey in the fact that Johnny Marr is a fantastic guitarist, but really, even working against Morrissey, he is the face of the Smiths, he is the songwriter. It's for the other two to be in cahoots to kind of oust Morrissey makes no sense.
They just didn't like him personally, I think. But anyway, they were, and then finally their contract was up and they made one last album. They signed to EMI to make that leap, but when their contract was up at Rough Trade, they just disbanded.
Yeah.
And so then EMI were after them for the money and Sire Records after them and trying to sue, but they were all trying to sue Morrissey alone.
That's just the weirdest.
Not the whole band.
It's so weird how Morrissey is, all the legal stuff and the court cases, it all comes back to Morrissey, not the Smiths.
Yeah, and yet the court case, which comes up later, but we might as well say it now, was one of the band who was saying he should get 25%.
So one of the other two, Mike Joyce.
Yeah.
So the Smiths had most of the time had 4 people in it, and Morrissey and Marr were the main songwriters, and the other two, it was 40-40 for Morrissey and Marr, 10% each for the other two.
Yeah, who persistently said that they wanted to leave, and one or the other was trying to leave in the early years. Yeah. So, and they weren't the songwriters.
They were the rhythm section.
They were the bloody rhythm section. Plus, they'd signed contracts stating that they were getting paid 10%.
Yes. But anyway, Mike Joyce disputed this and said, I want 25%.
Yeah. When they're getting sued, they're happy to let Morrissey be sued alone.
Yes.
They don't want 25% of that, do they?
Yeah, and also they're going after 25% of the sum paid to Morrissey and Marr, which essentially is a record company advance, which means that Morrissey and Marr don't get that money anyway.
I know. It's absolute robbery. And there's many, many, many pages of this, and I did almost tire of it. If it wasn't for the beautiful language, I might have. I do think if there's any criticisms of this book, it's perhaps that once the court case was wrapped up, Morrissey move on. Once he told us about it, because he kept going back. Yeah, he really, really wanted to put his case down on paper.
But I thought he'd done that beautifully within retelling the court case.
Yeah,
he didn't then have to keep using.
He went back over the whole thing and picked each point apart, which was fair enough. they were wrong. They were absolutely wrong on every count.
But like he says, he thought that the High Court judge, it was his opportunity to bring down a pop star who had been anti-Thatcher, anti-establishment, and this High Court judge who was very much part of all that. It was his opportunity to shoot Morrissey down, which he did, because if you look at the bare bones of the case, there wasn't a case.
Yeah. There really wasn't.
And Mike Joyce was like, all he said was, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And Morrissey actually had the evidence, like the contract that said that he signed 10%. And when Morrissey went for an appeal, he found a VHS tape of Mike Joyce saying we were never offered 25%.
It was broadcast on telly.
But he wasn't allowed to present that evidence in the court, so he lost the appeal.
Not? They said his lawyer was after a judiciary promotion or something from that judge.
Yeah, he needed to keep him with the judge.
Yeah. So it's absolute bullshit.
It is all bullshit, but this hierarchy of the English establishment is bullshit anyway. It favours the classes. So they were, that kind of institution was never going to favour Morrissey, not least because the law that they ruled on was from 1890.
That's right.
And, which doesn't lend itself remotely to a 1980s recording contract.
Exactly. Oh, and then the judge, at the end of it, the judge basically slandered him at the end of the court case because he made a sort of summary of the thing, which gets reported into the news, and he describes Morrissey as devious, truculent and unreliable, which is, devious is basically evil, truculent means aggressive, and unreliable, which is absolutely appalling because he is none of those things.
He's not, and all he did was get up and present the bare facts of actually what happened with clarity. And whereas the guy, Joyce, all he was like, I don't remember, that's really vague, I don't know. But in the summing up...
it's not about the money, but it's about the money.
It's about the money, of course it is.
And then after that, he can just go after the money, but nobody's monitoring that. So he empties Morrissey's bank account.
God, he tries to sell Morrissey's mum's house.
And then goes after his mum's house.
And then Morrissey's sister's house, where Morrissey's sister is bringing up her kids.
Then he has to take him to court to prove that the house is actually in his mum's name. And when he wins that, he has to pay $200,000 in court cases. It's a disgrace.
Yeah.
And then, skipping ahead, but that bloody bloke has the nerve to come back to him in future years and say, I know you probably hate me, but I'd really like to reform the Smiths. It's like, you utter twat.
Yeah.
You have completely murdered the Smiths, as he says.
Yes.
But also no other band took him up ever again. He never played again. He's thinking it's probably in case he did the same to them.
Yeah.
So what's the money worth, really? Because, what have you got?
Well, do you know what happened?
Money. A lot of money.
Yeah, no, a lot of money. But this guy was lucky enough to be chosen to play rhythm section for the Smiths. Yeah. And they had a good 5 years. It was all over. Morrissey and Ma went on to better things, and he sat twiddling his thumbs. Yeah. And he has nothing to do with...
10% of that must have been a kind of nice wage too.
Yeah, of course. Plus, he had the kudos of being in the fucking Smiths. That could have been his history. He could have gone on and been a brilliant session musician. Played for other people. Instead, he chased some money and he fucked his life and his career up, and forever put the final nail in the coffin of the Smiths.
Yeah, so they'll never reform. Incidentally, there's a lot of Morrissey songs that I thought were the Smiths.
Okay.
Because they just obviously one merged to the other, and I didn't notice the difference.
Yeah.
Which proves you don't need him.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, Morrissey's career has now outlasted the Smiths like 4 times over, I guess. Maybe even more. When the court case was happening, what I find really hard to believe is that the legal team around Morrissey then kind of just gave up and said
abandoning him.
Yeah, and so like a younger person with less experience was actually there with him on the first day of the court, and this is legal help that he had paid for, and they seem to let him down. Like he has been let down in every
over and over and over again in every possible way.
I know. So are we missing something then?
I don't know.
Is because we're reading his autobiography and we are in love with him.
It's like he's sitting there watching life go by going, hey, this is baffling. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me?
Is he a terrible person and people don't like him?
I don't know.
Is that a possibility?
I imagine it could come across like that, but I don't think he is inside.
No, I don't think he is. I'm just trying to rationalise why everyone lets him down.
He doesn't have the best way of communicating with people, which might come across as rude.
Yeah.
But very, very shy people often come across as rude. So it could be that.
Yeah. It's
Tragic.
weird, like this self-perpetuating thing, whether you get the relationships you deserve. In that, so many people have just treated him terribly.
They have. Yeah.
They don't really have any... I was about to say they don't have any reason to.
And they don't get him. It's like they've not bothered to try and spend the time to sort of get him. Oh, he's a terrible person. He's a miserable man. He's not very nice. Actually, he does come across as really nice, but just so introverted and in himself. If you give him a minute...
I find it so amazing that you started off as like hating Morrissey.
Well, through his music.
Through the idea of him and the music,
As a vegetarian, I'm very pleased with his animal rights.
I love there's a bit with David Bowie. Yeah. They're at a buffet and Morrissey goes over to David Bowie, who's putting slices of meat on his plate, and Morrissey says, "Oh, you're not going to eat that, are you?" And David Bowie goes, "You must be hell to live with."
Yeah, I can really hear him say that as well. And he goes, "Yes, I am."
Yes, I am.
He is self-deprecating
all the
way through.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, he had an amazing selection of friends despite him being a total loner. He's friends with Chrissy Hind.
Yeah, I love reading
Sandy
about her.
Shaw.
She sounds hilarious.
Nancy Sinatra's a good mate. But Bowie became a little bit of a mate. Oh, and Michael Stipe from R.E.M.
Yeah, that was interesting. I loved how they said that they met each other in town and they walked across, I think it was Hyde Park, because R.E.M. were playing the Hammersmith Odeon. And then he said, like 10 minutes before R.E.M. were on stage, Michael Stipe just walked in and got on stage and he didn't even change his clothes or brush his teeth. That's so funny that he observed that. Oh, Susie Sue.
Yeah, right.
That whole bit about he's kind of like so catty about her, but there's also a level of respect there, but just his observations of her, they were so entertaining. And also, again, we were just talking about how they were failed. How can any record label release a song which is a duet between Morrissey and Susie Sue and not even promote it?
Not promote it. And then she said it had to be hers only, and he paid for it.
Yeah.
It's astounding. And then she slagged him off in her autobiography. It's unbelievable.
Oh my God, the way he talks about some people is so funny. Did you like the bit about Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of Nothing?
Yeah.
What did you think about the bit about Kirsty MacColl? Because obviously she's sung backing vocals on a lot of Smith's
which I didn't
songs.
know. That's not obvious.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I'm a big fan of her as an artist, as a poet actually. I thought lyrically she was superior, you know. What I didn't know is that Morrissey had spent a lot of time in Mexico and she asked him what it was like and he urged her to go. This is in the book. He says you must go. Yeah. And she went with her family and on the first day she was killed.
Yeah, killed by a
speedboat.
A very rich Mexican businessman who then clearly, who was in the area of water...
There should have been no speedboats in the area.
Where you shouldn't have had it.
She was there with her two young sons.
She was just swimming and she pushed them under and took the hit.
Yeah.
To save them, so they were killed in front of them. It's dreadful. I remember it happening. Yeah, it's absolutely terrible.
But nobody ever ultimately.
No, that Mexican rich businessman, he paid his lackey to say it was him, and that bloke went to prison for 2 years and came out and lived in a very fancy house he'd been bought. It's so obvious that he was paid. But
did you get from Morrissey's retelling of it that he felt a bit of guilt for saying to Kirsty MacColl that she should have gone there on holiday?
He's devastated by that. And in this book, it's death.
Yeah.
He makes a friend, they die. Another friend, they die. Everyone dies. He makes a friend with a cat. The cat dies.
Yeah.
The bird dies. Everyone dies.
So
literally. But Kirsty MacColl, I think, is the one that really, really hurt him. The most, it feels like, because it comes up again.
Yeah,
I thought of Kirsty and
I mean, I would say that hearing her dying in such a brutal, unnecessary way, even as just a fan, it kind of hit hard. If she was actually your friend, because I imagine she's a fucking glorious person to know.
No, it's utterly tragic, and the family is still trying to get justice. I doubt they will, it being Mexico.
You know, just talking about celebrity, he does talk about other celebrities in this book, but I think this little passage here is a really good illustration of what fame is like.
Yeah.
And so he's at a festival and Bob Dylan is there, and so Bob Dylan is watching Morrissey perform from the side of the stage, and he says, "As I leave the festival," this is Morrissey talking, "as I leave the festival, I am asked if I would like my photograph taken with Bob Dylan. I say yes, of course. Minutes later comes a new announcement. I'm sorry, Bob says he doesn't want to do it. And my peck arises since I didn't make the request in the first place. A similar scenario would happen a few years later with Paul McCartney, when a knock comes to my dressing room and someone drenched in backstage stickers asks if I would like to be in a photograph with Paul. Yeah. To which I say yes, only to be later told that Paul doesn't want to do it. And I said, well, neither did I until I was invited. That's so funny. It must happen a lot, I guess. Yeah. Let's talk about the Smiths gigs as opposed to the Morrissey gigs, right? So what amazes me, and in fact there is a parallel between both of them, is how excitable, aggressive and violent the audiences are.
I know.
Because that does not fit the music.
No.
So where does it come from?
Yeah, it's really weird. Well, he didn't know. If he didn't know, why should we know? Because he said it absolutely baffled him. He's saying something like, heaven knows I'm miserable now, and the audience are literally pile on the stage and
tearing up chairs.
And
when you think about the archetypal Smiths fan, it really is the introverted bedroom dwelling person who's into poetry and like aggression is one of the adjectives you would never attribute to a Smiths fan. So yet the behaviour of the crowds are like something you would find at a thrash metal
it's
concert.
really weird. Maybe it's just that when you've bottled yourself up and somebody actually taps into it because somebody gets you, somebody sees you, somebody's talking how you feel,
that it all comes out, but to the point where you're wrecking the concert halls.
Well, look, Morrissey continuously was baffled by it, and if he hasn't worked it out, why should we?
Well, because I think it's an interesting phenomenon.
Well,
I mean, you kind of, the reaction he inspires, and I would say it's even more unlikely as Morrissey, the solo artist, as the Smiths, the band, because when the Smiths are young and they are playing music that's not so in keeping with the 1980s, and you're going, what they're inspiring in the crowd is kind of like that Elvis reaction or Beatlemania, where the crowd goes absolutely mental. And you kind of, all right, I can see how the Smiths could be equated to the Beatles, although I would say that the Beatles had a younger girl audience, and the Smiths were more of an intelligent and
racially mixed, gender mixed, age mixed from the sound of it.
But what's even odder...
Oh, is that later? That might be Morrissey's crowd, actually.
Well, the one thing that about Morrissey is that as he gets older, his fans seem to be getting younger.
Yeah.
But also, Morrissey, the solo artist, who, is 50 odd now, and in his, even the music that he creates does not inspire that kind of reaction from an arena crowd, but they all go mental. It's so bizarre.
It
so
really
bizarre.
Is. It really is.
The fanaticism that he inspires in people is so rare, I think, for a living artist. He almost, when people die and they become canonized as these icons, I think Morrissey has that, but he's still alive. And that, in a way, I'm totally baffled by the devotion
I think he's
of
the
his...
underdog, and I think there's no one else who speaks for them. So he's got everybody who's the underdog, and he's their leader. And there's a lot of underdogs out there.
Do you know what else I find weird? Is almost how at every step of the way, how his managers and record labels have kind of just failed him at every single turn.
Oh my God.
To the point...
Spectacularly.
Yeah, to the point where he should be like the most successful. He should be bigger than Mariah Carey in terms of record sales. I wonder then if the audiences go so crazy at his concerts because when they buy records and stuff, it's not registering. They're not always getting him to number one. So in the only way they can show him how much they love him is by destroying arenas.
That's a theory, but it's not calculated, is it? It's an actual physical and emotional response to the music.
But again, the music is not... I get Beatlemania because the Beatles were kind of like 4 chords, bang it out,
Maybe
3 minutes.
It's him. He's, he says, I can't perform unless it's completely truthful because otherwise I'd be a postman, I have to give my all. So he's pouring all his emotions and feelings and he's got no barriers to him. And he's just being honest and they're responding. But
it's religious.
It's not
isn't it?
A performance, it's truth.
Yeah.
And that's
It's very interesting because you could argue like Madonna fans go mad, but not to the extent that Morrissey fans do. But I've seen Madonna in concert right at the front, and I was let down actually by the lack of connection.
Right.
By the fact that everything is so highly choreographed.
Yes.
She's great, but I could be at home watching it on a DVD.
Whereas he means it.
Yeah,
means it.
I didn't feel part of the Madonna concert. I felt like I was watching it. So perhaps if you go to Morrissey, you connect
people are really
with him.
Connecting with him. We've got to the bottom of it.
Yeah. So then we need to go. I'd be too scared to go to a Morrissey concert.
I would now. I've read about it. Yeah. And another thing, may I add, I had no idea that he was so massive in America or the world.
No, because we're not told about it.
No, and he says this. He says, the absolute stadium adoration.
Yeah.
He'd leave in a car and see crowds and crowds of people wearing his T-shirt. Absolutely immense. He sold out the Hollywood Bowl and beat the Beatles record. And he goes back to Britain and they go, oh, miserable Morrissey.
Yeah.
And it's never reported that he's a success in America or the world, which he is. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
I didn't even know he was out there being amazing.
As a fan, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And I was reading this book in Mexico and this Mexican bloke saw it and said, oh, Morrissey, I love Morrissey. I said, you heard of Morrissey? He said, yeah, he's huge in Mexico. And I hadn't got to that point yet.
Right.
So I was like, is he? Then I get to that point. Wow, so what connects him to a Mexican? What connects him? Well, just a deep human truth. Yeah. That's it. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. I'm so surprised he's such a racist.
Yeah. Stop it. To be very, very clear, that was an 100% totally made up story. About
the racism. Racist, Oh my God, we're going to get to. I have so much to say about that. Yeah. Morrissey is not a racist.
They just made up stories about it. There was a point where he said that the newspaper had phoned up someone and said, "Where is Morrissey?" And we only need to know if he's north or south. We'll make up the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
It's just rife.
He's a total victim of the press. Yeah. Because they hate him.
How the press manipulate and invent interviews.
Yeah.
So Julian, I think it's Julian Casablanca, who was with the Strokes, a band, the Strokes, did an interview for the NME, and it says, a lengthy handwritten letter arrives from Julian, who sings with the band The Strokes. He is angry and apologetic at a recent NME interview in which he is quoted as calling me a faggot.
Yeah.
Julian writes that no such comment was ever made and nor would it ever be made, and that the writer had simply faked an entire paragraph.
It's incredible. It really is.
Wow. They're inventing.
You know, they're called the enemy.
Yes.
No, it's not right.
The press has a lot to answer. Do you know what? I think
the music press. You think what if they? Why would they try and bring someone down?
I know.
Oh, you said they're all linked, but
I just think the press is we always think it's the politicians, the royal family. Actually, the press is ultimately in control of the country, the way we think.
So the people in control of the press are in control.
Yeah, they are. I think Rupert Murdoch has more power than King Charles.
Yeah.
I do. And that's why Camilla feeds them all the crap about Harry and Meghan. She does.
Whoa! Conspiracy theory. Is he so anti-establishment that they won't promote him? Because it would give him power.
Even the music press.
They've said kill Morrissey. They've said put him down, kill him. And that racist thing probably did it.
Well, The Guardian and The Telegraph all run double-page spreads over what went wrong with Morrissey. Why is Morrissey so racist? And it's all fucking built on rubbish.
Yeah, it actually is.
It does just make you think he's not the only person that they're doing it to. They're doing it to everyone to fit their own narratives.
But now people have Twitter and stuff and they can actually put their story out.
Then
they have no outlet whatsoever.
Do you know what? I think even if you want to say they have that, I think sometimes, like with Harry and Meghan, they're telling their old story. If the opposite opinion is in the newspaper, who are people believing right now? The press, not Harry and Meghan. So even though they have Twitter, it doesn't matter. If you've got the media companies against you, Morrissey could, if he was on Twitter, tweet, I'm not a racist. 75% of people say, yes, you are. Yeah. Because it's been in the newspaper. And you'd have to be following
him to read that anyway, so you have to already be a fan. Anyway, continue.
I think the press build people up to knock them down, and I think perhaps at the advent of Britpop, they probably thought that Morrissey was a bit passé at that point. And I think to sell copies, sometimes it's good to write bad stuff about people as well as good stuff. Here's a good example of how fickle the press is. So Morrissey can wrap himself in a Union Jack, and that's a symbolism of his racism. At the same time,
Jerry Halliwell.
Oasis,
Yeah.
Britpop.
Oh, it's just called Britpop then, wasn't it?
Now we're celebrating the Union Jack.
Right.
They put their spin on it and call him a racist. You know that he took them to court and they have actually published apologies to say that he's not racist.
But the damage is done.
The damage is done.
Yeah.
Again, this whole podcasting is such an education in how the presentation of famous people is heavily influenced by the media and the press.
True.
And actually, if they want you to think something, if the press wants you to have a certain idea about someone, it's very easy for them to plant that seed in your head.
And it's also the case that when somebody gets very, very, very famous and loved, they try to bring them down because they shouldn't have power. They don't want them to have power.
Yeah.
They try to undermine their
it.
power.
Yeah, 100%. There's a really interesting quote in this book, actually, about what it's like to be famous. And we've only read a handful of books, but it's ended horribly for most of them.
Yeah.
So Morrissey says, from the perspective of the tomb, all of this gives no heart to the musician, which is usually why most of them conspicuously drop out of the racket or end up catacombed in a drugged death that is always assumed to be their own weakness. It is a paralyzing truth that once you enter the bullring of fame, there is no one to help you, most fall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems so unfair.
Yeah.
That really reminds me of the last day of Michael Jackson, where he's just like, I just want someone to be nice to me.
Yeah.
Nobody cares at that point.
No.
And then a couple of lines later, he says, this is after the court case and stuff, right? Sorry. He says it claims on artist income flood in like begging letters, and that you are told, oh, you might as well pay them to get rid of them.
Yeah.
So that's happened to Michael Jackson, actually. And that's damning to do that.
Yeah. God,
and that's why Morrissey wouldn't, and he took it all to court, and he appealed and he appealed. Yeah. In the long run, it didn't really... He ended up spending more money.
Yeah, and all the bad publicity. It does seem like if you want to get famous, you're going to end up in court a lot.
Yeah.
It's really boring,
well, it's like what you refer to as a pirate treasure.
Yeah.
Morrissey had it, and one of the other two, the rhythm section, Mike Joyce, who didn't deserve it, went after it.
Yeah.
To the point where he was trying to get Morrissey's mum's house.
Yeah. In this book, it's very heartening because as he really succeeds as a solo artist, the last... quite a lot of years in the book, he's touring successfully on his own.
Yeah.
And dare I say, he's almost happy.
No, I think you're right. I think within an industry which constantly... Morrissey is, whatever you think of him, he's a very successful artist, and he creates art which millions of people around the world love. You cannot deny that. I think after 25 years now, his success lies in his live performances. Yeah. He sells out in a heartbeat. Yeah. And whenever he wants, he can stand in an arena of people, connect with them, with his art. Yeah. And
which feeds him.
Yeah. And that's the best case scenario for this beautiful art which pours out of this man. It's interesting actually how that has prevailed, how he has succeeded against the odds, how every step of the way people have just almost not recognised his great... Now, the Smiths as well, how they never really treated it with the respect. Yeah. And even like from a business point of view, they never threw the money at it, which it deserved, to make them the biggest band on the planet. And stupidly so, because they could have made them so much money. The business people could have made so much money. It's astonishing how failed they were. And Morrissey, as a solo artist, every step of the way. But now...
And he still succeeded.
Yeah, he still succeeded.
Despite it all.
Yeah.
Amazing.
He is amazing. He is. Like I said, I now have such a crush on him, and the best thing about this is I actually get to go and discover his last 5 solo albums. And I'm enjoying it so far, but I just have a whole wealth of new things to discover, and I'm so happy to have done it. And if I had not found this book I would have just been ignorant of it all, and I probably would have had that thing in the back of my mind where he's a racist now.
Yeah, amazing, hey?
Yeah.
And I don't hate the Smiths anymore. I don't hate Morrissey anymore. So I'm liberated of that.
Yeah, good.
It's good.